Which world will rise after the end of the corona crisis? What are the forces that will emerge victorious and those that will be defeated by this war that the world is fighting with the new enemy of humanity? Questions that may seem early while the world is holding its breath, waiting for any hope out of this ordeal. But they are questions that preoccupy policymakers in research centers and government institutions responsible for shaping future decisions. We are already witnessing a competition to reap the fruits of any victory achieved in this confrontation, as do countries such as Germany, South Korea, Singapore, and others, while the two largest countries, China and the United States, are drowning in a series of mutual accusations about responsibility for the spread of this global disaster, and the authorities declare Beijing believes that Wuhan, from which the epidemic originated, is able to restore its economic movement and normal life, albeit in a limited way. The issues page is an attempt to highlight the results of the battle with corona on the future of international relations, through articles by Dr. Muhammad Kamal, Dr. Paul Salem, and Joseph Borrell, the European Union's foreign policy coordinator. The health crisis that the United States and the world in general are going through is the largest in nearly 100 years. Its economic repercussions may be the deepest since the Great Depression of the 1930s. An accurate prediction of the path out of this global crisis is not possible at the present time. However, there are a number of possible scenarios for this exit. The most optimistic scenario sees that an exit from this crisis may be possible during the next 3 months, depending on the effectiveness of social distancing and the possibility of rapid progress in finding effective treatments for the injured. This scenario assumes that people may gradually start to return to their jobs, and that the economies of the countries that will naturally suffer from recession will start to recover in late 2020 and early 2021. As for the darker scenario, it is expected that the epidemic will continue to spread for a period of at least 12 months and may extend to 18 months, that is, until a vaccine is discovered, tested and distributed, with the continuation of the application of isolation and closure policies. This is likely to lead to an economic downturn in the United States and around the world, similar to the Great Depression of the 30s of the last century, and may surpass it. Based on this bleak scenario, the economic recovery in the United States and other countries affecting the global economy may require a longer time, and this time may extend to 2022. According to this scenario, the social, political and security repercussions that will result from high unemployment rates and the growing number of the destitute and the poor, unpredictable at this exact moment. Regarding the United States, regardless of how long the recovery will take, the economy will experience a remarkable contraction, and basic sectors such as transportation, energy, and insurance will need a long time to recover. Americans are likely to turn to paying more attention to their own health and economic conditions. This means an increasing turn away from interest in foreign policies. The political administration of the country will also shift to the left, as the two main parties, the Republican and the Democrat, increasingly attach importance to the role of the public sector in providing support to the country's population and institutions. The U.S. presidential elections, scheduled for next November, are considered a key factor in demonstrating the changes that will occur in Washington's policies. It is impossible, at present, to predict who will be the winner of this election, President Trump or former Vice President Joe Biden. In the event that Trump wins, his priorities will be to pay attention to internal affairs, and he is likely to push for greater isolation of the United States from the world, weaken ties with international allies and partners, and will seek to reduce Washington's contribution to international institutions. Joe Biden, for his part, is convinced of the importance of international cooperation, and if he wins, he will try to restore the United States to a leadership position with its allies in NATO and around the world, and will seek to revive the American role in international institutions. But his victory wouldn't change everything. The focus of the American public, and Congress as well, is and will remain inward-oriented, and it will not provide much support for any major or costly foreign roles for the United States. In addition to this, it must be clear to us that the United States no longer occupies the dominant position in global politics that it occupied in the past, and this does not change in its balance the identity or personality of the White House resident. Russia and China have previously colluded to balance the United States in many regions of the world and areas of concern. In addition, one of the main concerns that cannot be ignored in the United States relates to the possibility that the presidential elections will not be held in November. And if the virus is not defeated, or if it spreads again in September and October, President Trump will not hesitate to declare that the conditions are not suitable for holding the elections, especially if he is afraid of losing them. It is likely that the Republican-controlled Senate will support him in his decision, and the Supreme Court may approve such a decision, especially since Trump had previously nominated a number of its judges. According to this scenario, the United States will enter the most serious constitutional crisis, threatening democracy, since the Civil War of the years 1861 to 1865. In any case, the United States will emerge from this crisis economically and politically weaker, more focused on its internal affairs, and less interested in restoring its declining influence globally, or getting involved in regional conflicts and disputes in the Middle East or anywhere else. On the other hand, the international system is likely to continue the path of disintegration that we have witnessed over the past years. During this period, we witnessed a Russian confrontation with the attempts to expand NATO in Eastern Europe, and Moscow also contributed to the processes of weakening the cohesion between the countries of the European Union, effectively as well, through its support for the rise of right-wing political movements elsewhere in the continent. China, for its part, confronted the U.S. hegemony in the Pacific and Eurasia. The Sino-Russian intersection contributed to ending the American hegemony that was entrenched after the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1990, and which was shaken after the outbreak of the dispute between Russia, China, and the West over the extent of intervention in Libya, and after Russia deployed its forces in Syria. The so-called global order that lasted after the collapse of the Soviet bloc is likely to be weakened by the epidemic. After the end of this crisis, the United States will be weaker than before, seek to separate its economy from the Chinese economy, and its focus will likely be on its domestic issues. In return, China and Russia will continue their attempts to expand their influence in the regions that serve their interests. At a time when some expected that this crisis will increase international cooperation, the opposite is likely to happen. The United States, Russia, and China have engaged in an information war, in which each side seeks to blame the other for causing the corona crisis. If Trump wins a second term, the current trend of tension will be strengthened, and the world will bid farewell to the possibility of real international cooperation. If Biden wins, he may seek to rebuild international cooperation, but his path to achieving this is bumpy and fraught with difficulties. We do not know what will be the position of the Chinese and Russian leaders. Which world will rise after the end of the corona crisis? What are the forces that will emerge victorious and those that will be defeated by this war that the world is fighting with the new enemy of humanity?